Welcome to part 1 of the non-calculator paper, Easter 2019, and I'm hopefully going to take you through questions 1 to 10. So let's start with question 1. Here are the ingredients for 10 flapjacks. We need to find the ingredients for 15 flapjacks. So our first job is to find the ingredients for 5 flapjacks. If we half this, we get 40 grams of rolled oats. Halving this gets 30 grams of butter. Halving this gives us 15 millilitres of golden syrup, and halving this, that's a little tricky, and if you're not too happy with halving that, you don't need to do that. So partition the 36 into 30 and 6. Half of that is 15, half of that is 3, add it back together, that gives you 18, and that will get you 1 mark in the exam for showing the recipe required for 5 flapjacks. We're now obviously after 15, so we now have to add together each set of ingredients. 80 plus 40 gives 120. We'll now pick up a second mark for any one of these correct. That's generally what the mark scheme suggests. 60 plus 30 is 90, 30 plus 15 is 45. This again is a little tricky. So again we can use a little bit of partitioning if we add the tens and if we add the units. 30 and 10 is 40. 8 plus 6, if you add the 6 onto the 8, that takes it to 14, and if we add them together we get 54 grams, and that is the 3 marks. You must have all 4 values here correct to get the 3 marks. We're now looking at question 2. We've got 3 different tubes of toothpaste, 3 different costs of course, and we're being asked to find the best value for money. The best thing to do here is to use a formula which is called cost over unit. I'm going to turn each of these costs into pennies. I've got a small, a medium and a large tube. That's a very quick way of distinguishing each tube, and we'll start with each fraction. So our cost for our small is 90 pennies and we get 50 millilitres. Our cost for our second is 132 pennies and we get 75 millilitres. Our cost for our large is 245 pennies and we get 125 millilitres. Now if this was a calculator paper, we would now divide, get a decimal, divide, get a decimal, divide, get a decimal, and then compare the decimals for the best value. Unfortunately, it's a non-calculator exam. So I'm going to have to turn each of these into a common factor. And a common factor of 50, 75 and 125 is 25 millilitres. Dividing by 2 here, divided by 2 here. Divided by 3 here, so if I just set up a division, 3 goes into 13 4 times because of 12, and then again 3 goes into 12 4 times, so that gives us 44p. The last one here, this is a divide by 5, so again, set up your division. 5 goes into 24 4 times, remainder 4. And 5 goes into 45 9 times, giving you 49p. You can now clearly see that this one is the best value. So you'll get 1 mark for setting up the fractions, 1 mark for getting each over 25 millilitres, and 1 mark for writing the 75 millilitre tube gives best value for money. Do not get sucked into writing is the cheapest. Effectively, this is the cheapest, and if you only had £1 and you went shopping, that's the one you'd buy. Do not write the cheapest, always reference the best value for money. And that gives you the 3rd mark, which will be a C mark, a communication mark. Question 3 is a scatter graph. The first thing we must do with a scatter graph question is check, are there any more points to plot? Having a quick look at the question, there aren't any more points to plot. The second thing you do with a scatter graph question is always try and draw a line of best fit. The line of best fit should flow through the data. I know some students draw an oval in pencil and then half that oval. I always tend to say try and get it to flow through the points. It now says describe the relationship between the number of pages in the book and the time Harriet takes to read it. Using this variable here as a reference, as the number of pages increases, the time taken to read increases. Don't write positive correlation. You probably would get the mark for positive correlation, but it is specifically asking for the relationship. This variable compared to this variable. And as this variable increases, which I've written there. Harriet reads another book, and the book has 150 pages. Find 150 pages and draw a line up, vertical line, up to your line of best fit. Mark it on the exam, show the examiner what you're doing. Estimate the time it takes Harriet to read, so now take a horizontal reading to the left. Marking where 7 is can be very helpful, and you can see now that for me that's coming out to be 7.6 hours. Indeed, I will accept anywhere between 7.1 and 7.9 on that question. So as long as you've got a reading between those two numbers, you're very likely to pick up the mark. You'll notice there's 2 marks there. One could be for the line of best fit. Indeed, one could be for the line up to your line of best fit and the reading across. So leave everything on your scatter graph very clear for the examiner to see. We now come to question 4, and there are indeed 3 ways of answering this question. If you've spotted already that they are corresponding angles and you have wrote x equals 55 degrees, corresponding angles are equal, you've got all the marks straight away. So that is method 1, and obviously down here x equals 55 degrees. However, you may not have used that method, and you may have used this method where you label that angle as 55 degrees, mark it, label it A, and reference it below. Here, of course, we're using vertically opposite angles are equal. We can now see there's a Z shape flowing through the parallels. You can't reference the Z shape or say the Z shape, but now you can say that x is 55 degrees because alternate angles are equal. And that is method 2, and I'm guessing that's the majority of you will have used that method there. There is a third method. If we find that this angle here is 125 degrees, and I'll just call it angle B on here. Now I can reference that all angles on a straight line add up to 180. I could reference again vertically opposite angles are equal. You can now use co-interior angles here. And co-interior angles add up to 180 degrees. So one of the 3 methods, I'm guessing this will be the most popular method out there, where we went vertically opposite the vertex here, and then we use the Z shape, which of course is alternate angles are equal. That must be spelt correctly as per these 3 words here as well. They are the crucial words. Opposite is also a crucial word. Corresponding, equal, equal. I'm underlining all the key parts that the mark scheme needs to see in your statements. Moving on to question 5 now, and we're being asked to estimate this question here. Now, this word here is crucial that you spot this word before you start multiplying all this out and dividing by 0.46, because if you see an estimation question, it will be on the non-calculated paper. It means we round everything to one significant figure. So watch out for that word. It's crucial you spot it, because if you start multiplying this out and dividing, you won't pick any marks up at all. So let's take each number, to the left here, and let's round each one to one significant figure. 1 rounding number, 1 rounding number, 1 rounding number. So 7 or 8. Our rounding number rounds us to 7. 1 10 or 2 tens. Our rounding number takes us to 2 tens, and I appreciate you'll all know that as 20. 4 tenths or 5 tenths. Our rounding number rounds us up 5 tenths. And again, I appreciate you may reference that number as 0.5. Any sight of at least 2 of them generally gets a mark, or having all 3 is likely to get you that mark as well. You may or may not get a mark for setting the question back up. You may have to take it through its first step and actually show the 140 there. So that's what I'm going to go for with this mark scheme, that you actually need to see 140 for the second mark. Now, 140 divided by 0.5. There is a very nice way of dealing with this without a calculator. You double the top and the bottom. Thus, you generate the number 1 here and 280 there. And 280 divided by 1, of course, is 280. Third mark for seeing 280. We're now moving on to question 6, and this is a BIDMAS question. The reason it's a BIDMAS question is I can see a number of functions are going to have to be worked with. We're going to have to square the t first because of the indices. We're then going to have to multiply by 5 because multiply comes next, and then we're going to add on the 2. But first of all, let's square a minus 2. I'll just write it out first of all, because you may or may not get a mark for substituting that in. Minus 2 squared. 2 times 2, which I'm sure we'll all agree is 4. And that minus inverts that minus, thus you end up with a positive 4. If I replace that into the question, we get the following. There may be a mark there, and I'm going to suggest there is a mark for seeing a positive 4 there. 5 times 4 is 20. And then we add 2 to get 22, with the second mark, of course, for the site of 22. Work out the value of t when h is 47. So this time we're writing 47 equals 5t squared plus 2. A plus 2 becomes a minus 2. 47 minus 2 equals 5t squared. And 47 minus 2 gives you 45. A times by 5 becomes a divide by 5. And that generates 9. A square becomes square root. And this is where we have a little bit of a problem. Most of you will know the square root of 9 is 3. However, there is a positive and a negative solution, and we need to see both on this new 1 to 9 GCSE. So I am suggesting, in fact, I'll redo this. I think there's 1 mark for that, say. 1 mark for seeing the square root of 9, or indeed 3, and 1 mark for seeing the positive or minus. There may be a few more marks in the exam. We might even see that that's worth 1 on its own as well. Minus 1 is less than or equal to n, which is less than 4. N is an integer. Write down all the possible values of n. My top tip here is write down all the whole numbers, that's what integers are. Write down all the whole numbers from the lower limit to the higher limit, and then start to consider the inequalities. Are you allowed to equal this number? Yes, so keep it. Are you allowed to equal this number? No, so just remove it there, and then commit your answer. Using commas is very, very helpful for the examiner. Question 7. Each exterior angle of a regular polygon is 30 degrees. Work out the number of sides of the polygon. Using the formula that all exterior angles add up to 360 degrees for all polygons, means that if we divide 360 degrees by the number of sides a polygon has, we will be able to determine the exterior angle. So, in this question, we're trying to find the number of sides. And what we're basically saying is the exterior angle is 30 degrees. That's what the first sentence states. We know that all exterior angles add up to 360. A divide by n becomes a times by n. And a times by 30 becomes a divide by 30. If I now simplify this fraction by a power of 10 and divide by 10 here, I get 36 over 3. 3 goes into 36 12 times, meaning the polygon has 12 sides. Question 8 now. We are told that we have two shapes and that they have the same perimeter. If I pick this point here and start to walk around this shape, I can start to determine the perimeter of the shape on the left hand side. I could even call them A and B if I want to use that to reference to them. So there's that side, add on that side, add on that side, and add on that side, and I now have 1 mark in the exam. If I write that that is equal to the perimeter around this shape, if I just label in the missing 2 sides, I will indeed have 2 marks in the exam. So that side, plus that side, plus that side, plus that side. Now we're not going to get any more marks now until we pretty much form an equation and solve it for x. So let's go through that process. Collecting this together, I can see I've got 10x there. I've now got 19x, add on the 7, and I've got 26x. I've got a -2 here and a -2 here, and when I collect them together I get a -4. Again, 5x and 5x give me 10x. There's 2 4x's, that's giving me 18x. Plus 5 and a plus 5 gives me a plus 10. The lower amount of x is 18, so I subtract 18x from both sides of the equation, and that leaves me with 8x minus 4 equals 10. A minus 4 becomes a plus 4, and 8x equals 14. A times by 8 becomes a divide by 8, and at that point there I'm definitely picking up another mark in the exam. So I'm saying 1 mark for either that or that scene, and 1 mark for them equal to each other. I'm guessing the mark may be given at that point there where you've collected both sides. And again, 3rd mark here for the site of 14 over 8. Now 14 over 8 can be simplified. We can divide by 2 and divide by 2, giving us 7 over 4. 4 goes into 7 once with a remainder of 3, and therefore we're dealing with 1.75. All of those are that 3rd mark there. Finally, the question says work out the length ST, and if I look at ST, it's 5x plus 5. So 5x plus 5 for ST. I know that x is 1.75. I now need 5 1.75s. One way of dealing with that is to actually write out 5 1.75s. This is called repeated addition. You can quickly add them together and eventually you'll get a total of 8.75. Add on 5 to that and you get the 13.75 that is required for the final mark. You could of course do 5 lots of 1, 5 lots of 7, 5 lots of 5, thinking of it in powers like this. And that of course generates 500, 350 and 25. Adding that back together you get 875. Then remember what numbers you were working with, and that puts in the decimal points there. So a couple of ways of how to deal with that question. Question 9. 1 mark for finding the 5th term when the sequence is 3n squared plus 1. Because it's the 5th term, n equals 5. So 3 times 5 squared plus 1. And again, that's BIDMAS. So we're going to do our index first, then we're going to multiply, and then we're going to add. 5 squared is 25. 3 25s are 75. Add on the 1, 76. It's worth 1 mark. Find in terms of n an expression for the nth term of this number sequence. Your first job is to find what's known as the first difference. You can see here we're adding 4, we're adding 4, we're adding 4. Sequence is going up in 4s, thus it's the 4 times table, which we reference as 4n. Now the 4 times table looks like 4, 8, 12, 16. These are the official numbers of the 4 times table. But we don't have those numbers. We are 3 below here, 3 below here, 3 below here, and indeed 3 below here. Question 10. Peter, Tarish and Ben are sharing £54. Tarish gets 3 times as much money as Peter, and Ben gets twice as much as Tarish. How much does Ben get? If you reference, first of all, P, T and B for each of the people involved in the question, And if you then say that Tarish gets 3 times as much as Peter, so if we say X is the amount Peter gets, Tarish will get 3x, and then Ben gets twice that amount, thus that is 6x, you'll pick up 1 mark there. You will also pick up 1 mark if you start to then talk about this as a 1 to 3 to 6. Now that is the same 1 mark. If I just draw out that ratio, you can now see there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 parts. You divide them together to get them parts as well. The second mark in the question is for showing the money available for everybody being divided by 10. So that is the second mark. That of course generates £5.40. So £5.40 in there, 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 and in there. In fact, £5.40 in every single part of the ratio. Locking on to who we have to now consider, it's Ben, so we have to add these together. Again, going back to some repeated addition here, those two will add up to be 1080. They will also add up to be 1080, and so will they. Now if I list the 1080s together here, 2 80s will create £1.60, meaning that'll be 21.60. And then 21.60 plus another 1080. The 6 and the 8 create 14. That creates 2. And there's 32.40. Many ways of finding the 6 lots of £5.40. I used the repeat addition method here. You could multiply, of course, by 6. Final mark for seeing 32.40. That completes the first part of paper 1. See you in the second video, where I'll take you from question 11 to the end of the paper.